Okay, Prof.
Selamat pagi tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, and happy good morning to ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to AeU webinar, and today we have an interesting topic: investing in women diverse entrepreneurs to boost the post-pandemic recovery. The COVID-19 pandemic has left no elements of society untouched, exacting a tremendous toll on populations around the world, healthcare systems, and financial and labor markets. From a business standpoint, its impact has fallen disproportionately on women and ethnically diverse entrepreneurs and small business owners. For example, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor 2021 found that women were 20% more likely than men to report business closure due to the pandemic, and nearly half of all the female businesses owners in high-income countries reported closures. However, while many women entrepreneurs lost their business due to COVID, female entrepreneurs around the world are constrained by social norms that dictate that they must be the primary caregivers. Furthermore, new research shows that women who are successful in business can face sabotage and even violence at home. Gender discrimination is one of the reasons for this disparity. Others include limited access to capital and assets, lack of support network, and other social and self-limiting factors. Henceforth, to empower female entrepreneurs, we must challenge gender norms. To better understand why investing in women and diverse entrepreneurs is crucial in the post-pandemic world, we have invited two experts to discuss the benefits that extend beyond financial returns and at the same time address some of the issues raised at UN Sustainable Development Goal number 5, that is gender equality. Let me introduce to you the speakers for today's webinar. Is Dr. Colin Crawford. She's the CEO of Corporate Heart International USA, Board of Directors of World Union of Small and Medium Enterprises, and Chair of World Union Small and Medium Enterprises Permanent Commission on Social Issues and Women Entrepreneurship. We also like to welcome the second speaker, Mr. Yazdi Jahangir Bangwala, who is currently the principal consultant of Apita Associates in Singapore and Apita Associates in Malaysia. Basically, a law graduate, Yazdi completed his marketing and business studies in the UK. A part of his experience has been with an international bank in London, where he gained valuable international exposure working with people from a variety of cultures. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
It's great.
In terms of procedures, I shall present the same issues to the two speakers, followed by their responses, and then followed by question and answer. The participant can post their questions online, and they will be answered during the question and answer session. The subsequent question from me shall be addressed to another speaker on a rotational basis. After all the speakers have been given their views, there shall be about 10 minutes Q&A to summarize the topic for today. It is to be reminded that this webinar shall refrain from discussing any sensitive issues that involve politics, race, and religion. So, my first question, and this is to Dr. Pauline Crawford. As I mentioned just now, the Global Entrepreneur Monitor 2021 found that women were 20% more likely than men to report business closure due to pandemic, and nearly half of all female business owners in high-income countries reported closure. Why is it imperative to invest in women and diverse entrepreneurs to boost the post-pandemic recovery in terms of economic growth of the country, especially in developing economies, of promoting social inclusions and combating poverty and discrimination? Over to you, Dr. Pauline.
Well, thank you, Professor, for inviting me, and it's a delight to be here. I think it's almost the starting point of across the world, 20% of women are closing their businesses. It's happening everywhere. but the reasons why are not necessarily the focus here. It's why waste the talent. Women are half of the workforce, half of the world, and the other side of it is that women are very good at business. When I spent 4 years in Malaysia and working with women entrepreneurs who were extremely creative, innovative, but were beset by many issues, especially funding, technology, and also the whole situation that they find themselves in balancing business and life. I also, through my work with the World Union of Small and Medium Enterprises, I find that this is happening in every country that we work with. So there are different pressures on women, but the need for women to be part of the economic growth of a regenerating culture is that it's difficult to almost say why it's not happening, because it's so essential. If half of the workforce is female, half the population of the world is female, we're wasting the talent that comes in. And we'll discuss in a minute what the social norms are that stop this. But I think if we look at it positively and we change the conditions which allow women to be more productive in their business, we're going to see a significant change in GDP and also in the style of businesses that actually embrace the family unit and the community. They always say, when you educate a woman, you change a whole community. And when you educate a man, you just change the man. There is some truth in that. And I think it's the external conditions that are making this 20% a reality across the world. There's also evidence that women-founded businesses, female-founded businesses, are not being invested in across the world. There's a huge drop in the number of companies that are women-owned that get funding easily. So this is not about whether women are good at business or not. It's whether or not we want them to be part of the economic equation. And I'm personally very much in favor of changing the environmental and financial issues that stop women actually producing more, both financial success and also job spaces, because that's what we need. We need economies that create businesses that employ other people gainfully. So that's my view, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. And what's your view then, Mr. Yazdi, on this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. I think, Pauline, thank you. You put the context very well to start. Some thoughts on this I'd like to share, which some of them are quite obvious, but I think to put the context, so there's no doubt that the role and importance of women is there. How do we get them more included? But when we look at the global scenario, it's a very diverse context, from developed economies, developing economies, and perhaps underdeveloped economies. It's an obvious thing to say, but the situation is perhaps significantly different. Therefore, perhaps solutions to some extent need to be looked at. So in the Asian context, we live in a very diverse, in the context of women-related equity, in very diverse ways as I see it. So for example, if I can look at a country like Pakistan, generally women would probably face significant cultural barriers. Yet this is the same country that has been able to provide a woman prime minister on 2 occasions, and also produced an International Peace Prize awardee, both women. So here's an example. Again, if you look at India, you also had a woman prime minister considerably well before perhaps in most Western economies. Indonesia has also had a woman leader. And Indonesia, as you know, perhaps one of the world's largest Islamic nations. So it's quite perhaps contradictory. Now, the other point I would like to sort of say, when we talk about entrepreneurs, of course, today maybe we are focusing on economic entrepreneurs. But I think women have, and definitely in that area, women have had immense challenges. But there is another field which I would call social entrepreneurship, which is enhancing communities, societies. in that sphere, you would probably see globally women have made more significant contributions. So all these points is to what Dr. Pauline said, there's no debate whether women are capable, etc. Is definitely is there. So perhaps the 5 or so main issues that hold them back. One is, of course, today we are talking gender and minority. I am beginning to observe in developed economies. I was in the UK a few months ago. They use less terminology related to gender and women. The terminology now seems to be around what they call DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the scope of the discussion seems to be enhancing. So as Dr. Pauline mentioned, of course, other limiting factors are access to finance. The maturity of economies in Asian countries differ, geographic situations differ, social cultural norms differ. So in Asian societies, we may have more developed economies. We also have, let's call feudal societies. We also have tribal societies. Religion plays a significant greater role in this part of the world. Then another issue that has emerged, which you've raised in your topic as well, the role of digitization, digital. The digital divide in the economic arena has probably alienated more women also, simply because of lack of access. So these are some possible global limiting factors. But the concluding point, as Dr. Pauline says, we are here to build a just and a resilient world. And therefore, including the role of women minorities is a very, very critical and an important point. So I think these are some points I wanted to highlight at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yazdi. Yeah, Mr. Yazdi, you have raised the issue of resource scarcity. So I would like to pose this question to you. Women and diverse individuals often run up against systemic challenges and resource scarcity when pursuing entrepreneurship and small business ownership.
Yes.
What are the several factors that have contributed to the low utilization of women-owned and diverse businesses, including inadequate resources to market goods and services to key target demographics? Okay. Over to you, Mr. Yazdi.
Thank you, Professor. If I can again contextualize to a large extent what I'm saying, a lot of generalizations is perhaps more relevant to Asian societies. And that's also a huge generalization because Asian societies are also very, very diverse. But last few days I've been speaking specifically to women entrepreneurs, catalysts who help women entrepreneurs to get myself updated. So certain things that affect this is availability of resources. For example, one of the persons, a colleague of mine shared with me, in an Asian family context, it is fairly normal for a son to get support from family to say, son, here's the family property or here's the family assets, go and mortgage it, get the money and start a business. And he'll go off to the bank wherever he goes and good luck to him. But if the daughter turns up and says, Mom, Dad, can I take the family asset and go to the bank? There's always like horror and shock and it can't be done. And even if most cases, if the girl is blessed to have a more supportive family, the father, the brother would turn up in that meeting so that male cultural support would be required. So the point being here is raising capital itself has certain social taboos. So neither will the lender look at the poor lady seriously, nor will the family give the support that it would to the son or the brother, etc. So that's one area. Then, of course, there's a huge amount of, of course, conservative societies, huge amount of social taboos that put a lot of cultural blocks for women to even dare to dream. So, of course, that affects things in many ways. So there was a very wonderful Indian movie that I saw, and I regret I can't remember the name. This story was about a simple housewife who dared to dream and didn't have many skills. So she convinced a radio show to become a radio jockey, where she was like a phone-in program person, and the public will call in and share their problems, and she will give some advice, motherly advice. Now this show became extremely popular because this woman was able to attract questions of huge amount of social taboos, cultural taboos, and she was able to address them in a very productive manner. And this show became a national award show. But because she was touching on sensitive sexual, cultural, gender, community issues, the husband, who was quite supportive, was finding a lot of what you call blocks from his own sisters, siblings, mother, that you're bringing shame to the family. How could your wife speak about gender issues, sexual, on the radio show? So she succeeded, but again, that societal pressure made her finally, for the sake of the family's reputation, etc., had to withdraw. So this is just a sort of an example that to what extent even women who try to dare face a considerable amount of social taboos, which perhaps are less so in developing economies. Another very interesting piece of data, actually, I just came across by chance 2-3 days ago, and this data is about on the status of banking in Pakistan. So Pakistan is a population of perhaps over 200 million, much more than that. Only about 160 million people of adults. So the adult population is 160 million. And only 60 million people have bank accounts. So you can imagine, even the men have not gone into bank accounts, bank account being a part of the ecosystem for entrepreneurs, etc., to flow. And a very small percentage of the 60 million would be female account holders. So just a random piece of data, but again shows the access is not easy to the banking system. Even the thought that a woman should go and open an account is like, ooh, maybe not so good. So access. As I quickly mentioned earlier, the digital divide. Now, digitization has come in. Women, again, not having access to the as amount of connectivity. So creates actually the gap can widen rather than slope. So therefore, women cannot get into capital intensive projects. Will be more the cottage industry type, tribal fashion, shoes, sewing machine, cosmetics, etc. Now, those who are already successful to whatever level they were during pandemic, as you said, during pandemic, cash flow drops in any business. Now, women will struggle with lower cash flow, and they also have less access to the financial system. So therefore, pressure on running the business and perhaps significant closures. So therefore, again, regrettably, the women remain in that sphere of cottage industry, small network industry, rather than be able to wear out. How am I doing for time, Professor? Otherwise, I will stop.
Okay, I think we need to move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Yazdi. And you have raised the important issues about women entrepreneurs being constrained by social norms, but we will reserve that question after Dr. Pauline answered this second question, which is what are several factors that have contributed to low utilization of women-owned and diverse businesses? Over to you, Dr. Pauline.
Well, thank you, Yazdi. I think you've covered a lot of points there, and we're talking about the systemic situation of the different nations across the world, and obviously in the UK, where I'm from, and where the USA, where I'm living, very different conditions. But actually, women are impacted very similarly across the world. And talking to women in Thailand, in Indonesia, Africa, they're all, especially during the pandemic, they were marginalized more. So where they were they were actually growing their businesses and getting some semblance of equality, the pandemic put women back further than men. And that's, I think, is a very important thing to really understand, is that women have always been behind the gate, in fact. But one of the things I want to pick up on is that there are these limitations. There's technology, there's finance, there's support systems. Women often get funding from families rather than banks. Men could get the money from the bank. Women are seen to be not supposed to be out there working, but they also do different types of business. And this is one of the things I think gets forgotten in this whole agenda of equality. And interesting enough, I promote the idea that it's not about gender equality, but it's about harmonizing what we do best and also changing cultural norms in terms of the man feeling less than because his wife or his mother or his sister are actually maybe earning more than him is a global issue. But that's something that we can only change with the will and the consciousness of both men and women coming together. I think one of the things is that women do different types of business. When I was in Malaysia talking to women entrepreneurs, it was amazing how many women started a business and also wanted to start a foundation. And I would say to them, but you haven't even got your business going. Oh, I know, but I want to build a foundation because I want to change the world and make it a happier, joyful place. I didn't find that when talking to male entrepreneurs. So there's a whole different nature of how women see the opportunities. And I think it's about whether or not we change the environment in order to make sure that the women who really want to be productive and creative are not only able to do it, they are celebrated for doing it. Because across the world, as we know, half of the world is female, 3.9 billion women in the world, half of the world. 2.2 billion of that 3.9 billion are mothers. So we always have a social norm in whatever culture we're in, which is around our family role, our family position, our community position. What I think we can do is to actually recognize we're not trying to challenge men to take over their role, but if men actually understand that women are a valuable part of the economy as well as the society and the community, we could actually create so much more and actually achieve more. The issues around technology and funding and resources are very practical. They're there or they're not there. I mean, some countries have really suffered and they don't even have electricity in some places, so they won't even have Wi-Fi. That impacts men and women. But if we actually change the conversation to one which is about economic growth, regeneration, harmony, doing things together, I think that's where we can start making some systemic changes. And that's one of my missions in this world, is to really add value to the fact that women entrepreneurs are very, not just creative, they're not just doing it because they want to do something, they add to the whole economy of a society, of a country, of a nation. So this is changing the environment is something we can all do together. And I would love to know your thoughts on that, Yazdi.
Okay, all right. Let's move on to the, since Mr. Yazdi has prompted these questions on constrained by social norms, let's go deeper into that issue. That is, female entrepreneurs around the world are constrained by social norms that dictate they must be the primary caregiver. I like to quote from a lady from Vietnam. Quote, on that day, for the first time, my husband, acknowledged my work and my contribution to society and the community. Since then, he's really helping out with the children and the household chores. Now I can travel much more for work, unquote. So, Dr. Pauline, can you suggest a strategy in promoting and normalizing shared responsibility and women, including diverse entrepreneurs, financial and digital independence? So I'd like to move. I mean, for you to answer this question. Any suggestion?
I was fascinated by this comment because when this husband recognized her value, he started helping her. So this is really the main sort of integration, I think, of what we do with our social, economic integration, not just male and female. You mentioned earlier the DEI agenda, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. personally, I think that's become quite divisive because it's very controlling. And actually, if we actually change I say if we change the playing field, not just the players, and that's what happened in that situation, because the husband observed what her work and her contribution to society was. He had that aha moment and said, wow, I'll go with this. And I think that's the conversation that's not happening. And I think we had a comment in the chat around, how do you overcome cultural taboos, cultural norms? And I think the word is slowly. They do change. In fact, they are changing in many places in the world. I'm doing some work in Africa at the moment where 6 African presidents of 6 African countries are actually standing up for a charter about positive masculinity and saying no longer violence against women and girls. This could change the whole nature of a culture if we change some of the cultural norms. If we say we want the best people working the best jobs in the most creative way, then we need to get round the table and talk about how do we do that? Who are the best players? And I think, I mean, very simple here is that the only thing that women do extremely much better than men is have babies. And actually, and also we're very nurturing. I did a lot of study of how men and women see each other, and the word nurturing only ever comes up about women. With men, it's about provider. There's some very simple attributes that we can work together. And I think the culture of our whole globe has been shifted with the pandemic. And, as we stated with the title of this program, it's about what's happened since the pandemic happened. And I think it's given us the opportunity to say, do we really want these things to happen? We're wasting talent if we don't actually encourage women to do what they do best, but with a women-centric lens. So it's not about women being equal to men. I say it's about doing the best we do and creating the system around it that allows that to happen. And I know when I was working in Malaysia, if you checked out the number of women who were running very small businesses, solo entrepreneurs, and you added them all together, it made up a huge amount of GDP. So I'm sure that's the same in Pakistan and in other countries, but it's a less understood figure because it's made up of lots and lots of small businesses. So I think this question of I don't think it's proving. She wasn't proving herself to her husband, but he observed something that made him shift his mindset, and that's the start of normalizing the shared responsibility. And one of my missions is I talk to my audiences about taking joint custody of our world. So I'll be interested to see what you think about that, Yazdi.
Okay, Mr. Yazdi.
Okay, Professor, please do interrupt and let me know if I've exceeded time, because we have this habit of talking, particularly me. So perhaps a different perspective to some of the things that can help women. Again, very contextual. But when I was talking to somebody who has been mentoring women entrepreneurs for quite some time, and again in an Indian context, in Indian cultural context, she said there is a very thin line between a woman being assertive, aggressive, or submissive. So the minute the woman goes into an entrepreneurial role, some degree of assertiveness is required. But this perhaps is probably seen as aggression by the community. Yes. And the expectation is that she should be submissive. So a lot of confusion can arise out of that. So women need to know how to transit these sort of arenas a little more smoothly. Yeah. So that's a big challenge. Even for you and me to be able to do that would be challenging.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, another very important thought process, I think, is we means educators, people who are helping financiers, we need to teach people to think like entrepreneurs.
Mm.
So we need to remove the gender out of entrepreneurship. To be an entrepreneur, you need entrepreneurial skills, doesn't matter what. Business is business. A leader is nothing to do with gender. But somehow society has created this gap. So we also need to re-educate ourselves as policymakers, educators, that our attitude that keep on putting this gender is an unnecessary limiting factor. And if you look on the positive side, really globally, historically, women have a greater tendency for empathy, which is required in any form of business. You will argue with me, but generally it is found women's capacity to multitask and take stress is much higher than men. They're good and quicker than men at building relationships. So generally their ability to sustain difficult times, their ability to have discipline, their desire to succeed, even if they're single mothers, they're divorcees, they have a lot of limitations. Those who go for it really can drive. So actually there are certain significant core competencies, if that's the word, women seem to have, that
Yes.
they can build further on. And we as sort of men sort of write these things off, don't pay too much attention to it. So education will help significantly. So yesterday, one of my friends who visits Africa, he was telling me a story of a lady in South Africa, Durban. 5 children, single woman, not educated. She can only afford to send 2 children to school. Her day starts at 5 a.m. in the morning, getting the school ready, getting the kids going, get the school, come back, do some gardening, grow some vegetables, so there's some food in the house. Go and work as a domestic worker for a few hours in some few houses, collect a little bit of cash, come back, fry chips, and then send the 2 kids outside the school to sell the chips to earn a little bit of extra cash. The whole day goes on. At the end of the day, exhausted, etc. So, but entrepreneurial spirit is there. In all this chaos, she can cook the chips and sell. But he asked her, so what's the cost of your chips? No idea. Is she making money on the chips? No idea, etc. So the business skill is not there. So we can support them with that. There's another trend that seems to be emerging because of pandemic. A lawyer advised my friend that the number of divorce cases has increased significantly after pandemic, mostly initiated by women. Why? Because women beginning to realize that the men are not contributing anything. They're quite better off without the men. They can be happily carry on without. So that's another trend that is emerging. We have this paradigm that men. Okay,
all right.
fine.
I'm going to. Have you heard it?
There's one question. There's one question posed by Mr. Chitra, and I would like to invite Dr. Pauline to respond to the question. Please post the question. Okay. Chitra, what if we overcome cultural taboos by having regulations and options available to women? If they qualify for fundings, no one should deny it to them. Trying to change culture is almost an impossible task. But if laws support women, then there is a legal access. Then no question of culture will come to play. So I believe with your experience in both Western and Eastern culture, Dr. Pauline, you may be able to answer that.
Absolutely. I think it comes back to this whole idea of what's important, and I want to answer Yadsi's comments about entrepreneurs and business skills. There are different ways to do business. I would challenge it slightly. Is that if you take a look at the microfinancing back in the day in India when it started, and money was given to women in small amounts, and they were very efficient with the investment and always repaid. And and it turned into the Gremlin Bank, and I hope everybody knows that story. That the microfinance was very much about giving women small amounts of money for doing the job that they were doing, And they may never have been trained in business skills, but they were very good in business. There's an instinctive nature in an entrepreneur, although we can teach them more business skills. But I think the question here, which Chitra is asking, is it only that will make a difference? So if they get the funding, and I think there should be more realistic ways of doing that microfinancing again, and not having this limitation on women funders, women business owners not being funded. And that's happening across the world at the moment. In the US, the stock market is not investing in women businesses as much as they did even a year ago. So there's something going on, because maybe we need to change the culture first. And I think we need laws to help us, but I don't want to change it. You can't change a culture by law. A culture is the way things are done, the way we've always done things and how we do them. And I think there's some changes of mindset that need to go on around the complex nature of the gender issue, if it's a social development goal, but if it's just about helping people to do what they do best in the situation they're in. So if it's a single mother and she has a family, but she wants to do a business, how can we help her? If it's somebody who's retired, they want to do a business, see how to help them. Everybody is at a crucial crossroads in this world, and our cultures are changing. So we do need laws that support women, but I'm not for laws controlling things, because I don't think that's how we initiate the imagination that we need in the entrepreneurial market. And I just wanted to say, women and men are different. We have a different way of doing things. Men are much more straight line, much more either or. Women are very and, are very relational, very multitasking, very complex. Identifying those, not one is better than the other. And I don't know whether you know the great quote that Timothy Leary said in 1967, said, "Women who seek to be equal to men lack ambition." This is not about equality. This is about difference and understanding that we have a changing world. And some of the conversations are complex, but like with the previous statement where the husband realized, oh, actually my wife can do something that I can't do, but I'm okay with it. That's the kind of cultural shift that we will find. And it's not going to be easy, but I think the lockdown and pandemic was the way of saying to us, we need to do things differently. And the Titanic is sinking, and we don't want to build another ship like the Titanic.
Yeah. Mr. Yazdi, you are a lawyer, so I think you may be able to respond to this question from the legal side.
I think, Professor, rather than the legal side, my last 30, 40 years of working experience has contributed more to my thought. And I've been working with many organizations in the field of change management. How do you change cultures, attitudes? So organizations also have systems, rules, regulations, nations have them. My personal view, and I'm very committed to that view, is that change really comes from the individual. The laws are icing on the cake, enforcing laws. I mean, regulatory frameworks are required. You have the best global regulatory frameworks on so many things, including SDG, including fraud, including transparency, including corruption. But we are lacking in many, many areas. So yes, frameworks are needed. I don't deny it. But it was one Nelson Mandela who could make a significant change in the system of apartheid. There was one Martin Luther King, one Mother Teresa. So I personally, and this is my personal reflection, would rather spend my effort and energy on building 5 or 10 leaders, 20 leaders who can contribute to a cultural shift. Laws can carry on. There are plenty of parliamentarians who will keep on creating laws, implementing, etc., etc. So, although if you look at another very wonderful example of the state of Singapore, because I've been observing how it is enhanced and developed over the last 30 years, a lot of legislation, there's a law for almost everything from flushing the toilet to spitting, etc. So point is, if you want sustained change, laws can give you short-term change. But the minute the law is not watching, I will carry on with my old ways. So if we want sustained change, I really believe the regulation is not the driving force. The important support system. Thank you.
Absolutely. I just want to make a comment. A lawyer I was talking to recently, he said, we should not make laws for moral issues. We should make laws for structure or criminal or whatever. But I think that's where this comes in. It's a tricky question, but there do need to be some regulations that help women, but they don't need to be so controlling that we don't change the whole system. We need to look at it as a matrix, if you like, and decide what it is we want to regenerate the economic, social, culture, country, the whole piece.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Pauline and Mr. Yazdi. And I would like to pose this next question to Mr. Yazdi, basically more of marketing strategy. Recent studies suggest that demographics would be willing to shift brand loyalty if businesses were more focused on creating goods and services tailored to the specific needs and make more concerted effort to serve the communities that have been historically excluded from the mainstream outlets. Please offer suggestions on how these women and diverse entrepreneurs could offer such unique perspective on the underserved consumer segment. Over to you, Mr. Yazdi.
Yeah, this is a challenging question. So one of my colleagues who's head of a global marketing advertising association, he was commenting to me that marketing and advertising has already been stereotyping and limiting the roles of women in the types of advertising, etc., that they put out. So one intervention would be to educate marketers and advertisers to shift their way of how they project women in society. So earlier, when we were talking of the earlier question, do legislation, etc., will help the change? Okay, we've discussed that. I think in changing societal norms, etc., the role of advertising and marketing could play a significant role. And so that's perhaps an area that advertisers and marketeers could look at a global level. So, but I'm making a very general statement from what I've been observing most in Asia. A good percentage of the female entrepreneurs seem to be serving female markets, home markets, family support markets, fashion, cosmetics, home care, etc. So it seems to break into the other fields of economics seems to be a bit more challenging for them. Again, maybe cultural norms can come into it. But some of the things that I'm aware that is happening. So, for example, again, I know in many countries there are entrepreneur institutes. I think Dr. Pauline is also founded and pioneering some. So some of the things I've seen is universities have started particular programs for women entrepreneurs. But I feel that these initiatives that are coming out of universities have to be more practical focused, not academic focused, because the struggles that women may be facing in Asia are not necessarily of the academic nature. So one NGO in India called CWE, Catalyst for Women Empowerment, they have a very interesting program which involves a lot of hand-holding, entrepreneurship, in mentoring women to move into different areas. So to do that, they also not only provide them with the financial capital, they train the women to pitch to the investors, they train them the process management skills, the project management skills, and they even sponsor them onto a Stanford entrepreneurship program. And what this is that these women get certified in the business skills, and therefore when they pitch to a financier, a funder, a VC, they are perceived sort of differently, and therefore they can begin to start moving away from the cosmetics and etc. type of arena. So there is one lady I remember meeting some decades ago. one lady in India called Kiran Mosmandar Shaw. She started a company called Biocon, which is today one of a leading global company in the field of medicine, vaccines, and global research on diabetes, etc. Products are sold Brazil, South America, many parts of Asia. So she is one woman founder who's built, a global organization in again an Indian cultural context with all the social taboos, lacks, etc., etc. So maybe isolated example, but I think even in India, a lot of role of women coming away from housemaking, cosmetic roles into chartered accountants, financial services, and other arenas where they were not perceived is sort of happening. So there are some changes that are happening. Um, I think I'll leave it there. Maybe I've said enough.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Yazdi. And I'd like to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please post it in our chat group. And now back to you, Dr. Pauline. On the same question or same issues, please offer suggestions on how these women and diverse entrepreneurs could offer such a unique perspective on underserved consumer segments.
Yes, I mean, as Jyoti said, it's a very interesting question, and I love the fact that you went first because, the kind of businesses that women like to do, not all women, because there are women in tech and in science, and obviously STEM, and now with AI, everything is going to change, but the businesses that are very female-centric, the product and service is also female-centric. And it would be the same with men. So, if we could find a product which was very male and only bought by men, those are marketplaces where the identity of the designer, the entrepreneur, will fit with the product. And one of the things we do know is that the consumer of the world is female. And this is something in Western countries, especially and everywhere. The one who's spending the money, she might not be the entrepreneur, but it's a woman spending the money. And this whole idea of, like the marketing and everything, we have to be much more flexible. And I see it that we're, instead of a male world fit for profit and then selling to women, and women are at home, which is a classic 100 years ago, but not very long ago, we're now moving to very specific aspects of marketplaces which are geared to women or geared to men or geared to both. And the other one is the younger generation, which are also male and female, but the young kids now, drowning in AI and artificial intelligence and metaverse and everything else. Life is going to be very different in terms of marketplaces. So I think we need to be more agile, and women are actually quite good at being agile. And, there's a lot of talk about agile markets. And I think in terms of entrepreneurial programs, we have to be much more broad in our embrace. And I'm not critiquing any entrepreneurial programs that you, either both of you run, but sometimes I had come across people doing an entrepreneurial course and they've never run a business. How does that work? So I think it's what you said, it's about being practical and down to earth and more specific. And there is a nature of trade skills and, the cake maker, I don't make cakes, but there's big business in making cakes, and that's a very female thing. And yet you get some very excellent male bakers. So that's where we're becoming more harmonious rather than concerned about who's doing what. I think that we're not got to force people to do something they don't want to do. I'm very keen that entrepreneurs do what they're passionate about. They don't just do something to make a lot of money.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Dr. Pauline Crawford. And AeU is organizing a series of webinars, and the theme for this 2023 webinar is Embracing UN Sustainable Development Goals at AeU. So the last question is related to UNSGD. Number 5, that express gender equality is not only a fundamental human right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world, unquote. So in this webinar, in the context of women entrepreneurship, especially aftermath of COVID-19, please provide several suggestions on the long-standing inequalities in multiple areas of women's life in their entrepreneurial endeavors so as to build a more just and resilient world. I think this question also helps to answer the question posed by Ms. Chitra just now. Over to you, Dr. Pauline.
I think the social development goals, there's some noise, the social development goals are very well intentioned, and social development goal 5 is about gender equality. I think that we need to embrace gender harmony, and this is my mission in life, because I think we are equal and different, and equal opportunity, yes, diversity, yes, all of those things. We will create a peaceful world if we understand each other. But I think it's much broader, because we know that half of the world is female, and that there are a lot of marginalizations in the female communities of the world. Inequalities cause tension, inequalities cause stress, inequalities cause violence in some places. Inequalities are what the whole world is arguing about, and I'm for a peaceful world. So I think it's a bit like the question about, do we need laws? I think we need frameworks, but we need to be flexible about how we address these. I'm actually part of the G100, which is a group from India, which I don't know whether you know about, but it's 100 women on 100 topics in 100 countries, in 100 cities, multiplying across the world, talking about how do we address gender equality in a much broader way, in a joint custody way. And I think that's what women do. Women see it as a multiple level subject, and we want to come to the table. And I was actually recently, I wasn't actually in the room in the UN, but I was part of an event where it was talked about that, we must address this, and not just for our own sakes, but for the sake of the planet. So this is a very important issue. We need harmony, which inside that is equality, but it's not fixed in stone. It's not going to be every woman doing the same job as a man. It's not that kind of equality. So I think we need more conversation around this idea of gender equality.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pauline. What about you, Mr. Yazdi, on this issue, the long-standing inequalities in multiple areas of women's life and their entrepreneurial endeavors, so as to build a more just and resilient world?
I think I endorse what Dr. Pauline is saying. We should be focusing on the harmony, not necessarily on the equality, because the 5 fingers are not the same. Each one has a different shape, size, and together I can hold something. I think we need, so that's a very important point. And she quoted something earlier, by just giving women equality, you are actually limiting them. They could perhaps go even beyond. But if you look at, again, this is, as I said earlier, on the one hand, the social norms, cultural norms are holding, but at the same time, if you look at certain patterns, so when I was talking to this catalyst at the Women's Empowerment Center in India, so she quoted me a very interesting, some data. She said she did a study with a group of 30-year-old, average group, 30 years old. 98% at the age of 30, boys were married. Only 2% of the girls were married. Traditionally in India, the poor girl at 17, 18, 19, 20 would already have married and produced, and guys, etc. So the minute education is coming, women's own attitude towards family, child rearing, etc., is also changing. Women are the trend and pattern is sort of changing. If you again look at societies like Singapore, Japan, there's a lot to show that women are also delaying what shall we call childhood to a much later age. Or if you look at the declining birth rates, both in, well, even in developing countries, birth rates are definitely declining. So
Yes.
uh, so therefore the pattern of this equality game seems to be changing. Even another comment made to me in an Indian context is that, these women who are now getting mentored and getting exposed to entrepreneurial skills, they just go and grab their rights. They're not waiting for someone to come and give them their rights. I'm not saying a huge percentage who don't get the education, etc., are still not subservient, but there is a segment that is evolving. And
Yes.
obviously, education exposure. Now, I don't mean formal education, I don't mean university education. I think for women, particularly, a lot of hand holding, mentoring is required. Hand holding, not in a negative sense, because their issues are significantly different. You could not have an academic or someone who has not run a business help them. And particularly, I see in this particular context, there's a lot of women entrepreneurs being guided by women mentors.
Yes.
Because it was actually very ironic. I was talking to my colleague in India on this subject to prepare myself. And during the call, she said, I need to cut this call because I have some urgency firefighting to do. And what was it? One of the lady entrepreneurs she was mentoring had called in an SOS call. Why? Because the mother-in-law was troubling her on some domestic issue. And as an entrepreneur, she finds struggling to cope. So now only this lady mentor who has had an understanding of how to handle a mother-in-law. I have no understanding on those issues. An academic may not. So there are whole multiple areas. Another lady was telling me she was mentoring an entrepreneur in Iran. And a lot of the issues, besides the business process issues, were helping her to handle the societal issues. And
Yeah.
only a person who has been through that could be another woman who could actually support and guide and develop them. So it is not about developing a curriculum, having a certification, micro credits, certifying. The university academic approach may not be the best way. However, education, mentoring, support is really, really required to create that harmony for them. I don't know, if that helps. So if you look at other patterns, traditionally, regrettably, women's role was limited to teachers, nurse, doctors, But today, even in an Indian context, I'm told they're coming into chemical engineering, organic farming, medical manufacturing. They are going into mental health counseling. So education has created and is creating opportunities for them in that area. Uh, so you can see in Indian society, even in Pakistan, women taxi drivers, etc., as small entrepreneurs. So the role is changing,
Yes.
and women as just being weak, that thought is to some extent moving. So one other point was made to me was be very, very careful that you don't start women empowerment schemes based on subsidies. Sometimes in the West we are very good, 500 ringgit here, $500 here, $1,000 here, go and do something.
Yeah.
Those handout mentality that politicians are very good at and very used to, and popular with people, is not really that core money should go in the real type of education to create dignity and respect for women. Another thing, a common theme that is emerging to me in Asian context, that the society has really impacted women's self-esteem to a great extent. So they even dare not dream what will see. Every entrepreneur must face failure because it's part and nature of entrepreneurship. If a guy fails, we will tolerate it. If a woman fails, the whole society, the family, everyone will jump on her.
That is so true.
Women may have to think 10 times, shall I, shan't I, could I, what if, what if, what if, what if. So that self-doubt is another thing that they have to sort of cope with. But having said that, there is obviously not enough happening. More needs to happen, but in a concerted way, in a way. Anyway, these are some general observations that I thought I'd share.
Thank you, Mr. Yazdi. I think the message to bring home here, it is not so much as gender equality, but gender harmony, I think. And with that, Dr. Pauline, you have written a book on that. So can you just give us a glimpse of
So the idea about the power of authentic harmony, and this is something for everybody to think about, is rather than fighting for equality, we seek authentic harmony everywhere. So this is about authentic harmony in business, in life, in the community, and the subline is magical conversations that transform our world. So the key in the magical conversation is no judgment. So having a conversation with no judgment, because authentic harmony has to move forward. And if you think about it, harmony creates music. Harmony creates a script that we all want to be part of. And if we're all part of the script of trying to change the world, then it will evolve. I've always said that one of the things that women have brought to business is life. So we can't leave life behind because of these things that happen with our families, whereas men have been often very singular about being at work. That's work, that's home. So we're not asking men to do that. We're saying that there's two sides to the landscape, and that embracing family into business will help. And if you think about it, in the lockdown, we all went into home working and hybrid working now. Life has changed, and we can embrace the family and business and society and make it work. That's my view. And that's why this book is about harmony.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pauline Crawford and Mr. Yazdi. Any idea or top opinion from you to summarize the whole webinar?
I would like to say that I think it's been a wonderful dialogue, dare I say, a magical conversation, because there are two sides to everything. And the more we look at it, and what you both have said, is that the world is changing. We're not going to go backwards. You know, the past has actually sunk. We've still got lots of things from the past, but we're doing a different journey, and it is changing. And my bottom line is that toxic behavior, violence is not acceptable. Violence is definitely not acceptable, but toxic behavior maybe needs talking about. So when somebody sounds aggressive and they're not meaning to be, maybe we just have to take a new perspective on it. So I want to thank you, Professor So, because this has been an excellent webinar for me. I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yazdi.
Yeah, thank you. So in closing, my sort of thoughts are, building a more harmonious world, which Dr. Pauline would talk about,
Yes.
Will help us to fundamentally combat poverty, which great part of the world is facing, discrimination. Significant parts of the world are caught in terrorism. Terrorism rises because lack of harmony, lack of economic opportunity. It leads to social dysfunction, drug addiction, etc. Societies are paying, Western societies are already paying huge amounts of their GDP on fixing drug addiction, mental health issues. These are again, it is very important beyond the gender. Building harmony is a responsibility for all of us. Second point is that we need to appreciate that old economy model of I supply, you buy. The digital world is now we collaborate, we co-create, and we build. So that model, because of digital IT presence, is already happening. Another factor I think is very important for policymakers and even for us as educators. We have got trapped into this GDP measurement. We believe that everything good can only be measured by GDP. And if it doesn't get measured, it is not valuable and contributed. So a lot of the efforts that women make as homemakers doesn't get recorded anywhere in the GDP. Now, every nation says our people are our greatest asset. Without our people, we can't get anywhere. It is the homemaker, it is the mother who contributes most significantly in building that talent. It's not recorded anywhere. But 8%, 6%, 7% GDP, and we are all very excited. So I've been very enamored by this model from Bhutan, the gross national happiness model. This more inclusive, more balanced, in building a balanced, more harmonious future, which what Dr. Pauline is talking about. So I think we as academics also need to reorient ourselves, not old model, old measurements, and everything that is measured is not what life is about. So we need our academics to now go back and put their thinking caps. How do we capture what is real progress? Is harmony important or not? Or is it just the dollar going up to the economy? So that's another point. Another observation I make is that we have suffered globally a pandemic, and everybody is in a rush to return to the new normal. But what I see is they just want to go back to the old ways, not having really learned the lesson of the pandemic. And to me, what was the single largest lesson that the pandemic has come to teach this world? And that is, you and I are connected. If I am sick, you are sick. If you are sick, I am sick.
Yes.
But this lesson, most of us seem to have ignored, and figuring out how do we go back to the new normal. In this, we have not distributed our vaccines equitably. We have not taken care. I'm not saying there have been a lot of unsung heroes who have gone beyond the call of duty. But policymakers, global institutions have not understood this concept of connectedness. So if we understand this concept of connectedness, harmony will automatically flow, because that's what Dr. Pauline is talking about. We can't see harmony because we have failed. Educators have not allowed us to understand what is this connectedness. And I'm not talking of connectedness in the term of some philosophical vague notion. There's one professor here at the in Malaysia, University of Malaysia, Professor Raymond Wee, professor of quantum physics. He will show you mathematical formula after mathematical formula that I failed to understand because I am not a mathematician. He will show you enough scientific evidence to show you why you and I are scientifically connected. We can't seem to digest this. Even the pandemic taught us this lesson. Most of us don't seem to have internalized this message. So what I would like to say, SDG, wonderfully created. It has been going for a number of years. Some argue we will not be able to meet the SDG goals in the time frames that we had set. So maybe we need to enhance the SDG goals to bring something that is more talked about in the Eastern concept, which is this notion of connectedness, and the second notion of compassion. So to enhance SDGs, we should not simply follow what is coming from the UN. We should add value to it by internalizing these concepts of compassion and connectedness. These are not philosophical terms to me. Therefore, work like Dr. Pauline is doing in Harmony is very connected to it. It's gross national happiness. Enough data is there. So as you would see, you have also introduced me as a director of Sajatra Leadership Initiative in Malaysia. Sajatra also is there to promote this concept of compassion, connectedness, harmony, togetherness. So this is the way I feel we should, as researchers, I understand some postgraduate students, etc., maybe hopefully viewing this session today. In your own research, please look at the role beyond your research. We have become very reductionist in our thinking. In seeking for solutions for a better world, we have been reductionists. I would request you to look at more, and request universities to be looking at things more in an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach, and move away from the reductionist methodology where traditional science has taught us because we don't seem to be getting the harmony, the prosperity, the peace that we are seeking for in a better world. So, in conclusion, please look at the role of compassion and connectedness to create a deeper footprint and get the results that we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yazdi. I think the message to bring home here is, I think I can summarize into three words: harmony, connectedness, and compassion.
So I hope you can
with
bring
that-
some of these to your university programs. They should all become core part of all university programs.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And yeah, that's right. So once again, I would like to thank Dr. Pauline Crawford and Mr. Yazdi for your time and your wisdom, and you have shared with us and also the audience. And I would like to also to thank my technical staff for helping us to facilitate this workshop without any glitches. And lastly, to all my audience who have been with us for the last hour. And until we meet again, we wish you all the best from AeU University, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Pauline. Nice seeing
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.
One second.